I hurried on. Around the last bend of the souk, I came to the khan, the inn, the caravansary where caravans gathered, where they rested on their way, and where most of the wholesale business of cities was conducted. The wide gate stood open. I peeked inside. The courtyard was jammed with men, white men, black men, tan men. Some were dressed like the men I knew, like me myself. Others wore outlandish costumes in colors of which I'd only dreamed. Still others covered their bodies with almost nothing at all. The din of their voices filled my ears, but I couldn't understand anything I heard. Their languages were as varied as their dress and their skin. I drew back outside the gate. Where was I to go? To whom was I to speak? I felt as lost as a fledgling that's fallen from the nest. The smart thing to do, I thought, was simply to turn around and go home. This was no place for Buran, sheltered and protected daughter of Malik, who was known throughout Baghdad as Abu al Banat. Next to the gate, built into the wall, was a great tank, hewn out of stone and kept full of water for the benefit of all who passed, thanks to an endowment left by a wealthy citizen, ensuring through blessed charity his place into paradise. I pushed aside the marble lid, filled the copper ladle, fastened firmly to the lid with a chain, and drank the cold water until I was satisfied. It seemed to fill me with courage as it quenched my thirst. This was no place for Buran, but it was the right place, the only place for Nasir, self created that very morning and out to make his own way in the world. I threw back my shoulders, thrust out my chin, and stepped forward through the gate with a touch of swagger, much like the one I had seen in the Walk of Hassan as I'd peered at him through the curtains and arches half a hundred times. A few men were squatting on benches of baked bricks on both sides of the gate. I picked out the one with the kindest looking face and approached him. "Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you," I greeted him. "And to you, son," he answered. "I seek a place in the caravan," I said, dispensing with any further formalities. "Then go to find Gindar the Reyes, the chief, or you won't make the journey," the man warned me. "You can't miss him," he added with a laugh. Then he turned away to talk to his neighbor. I stepped down into the huge open courtyard. I was swallowed up in the melee. Horses, donkeys, camels, and shepherd dogs neighed and hee-hawed and barked. The beaten dirt of the ground was covered with bales of merchandise, stuffed saddlebags, packages wrapped in leather, and countless other bundles in the process of being loaded on the backs of animals. I had come just in time. In another half an hour, the caravan would have departed, leaving nothing in the courtyard but piles of dung for the porters to clean away before the arrival of the next caravan, the next crowd of merchants and traders. I stepped through a door into the vast inner roofed courtyard. It was just as crowded with human beings as the outer area, but it was at least free of animals. All around, above and below, doors opened into it from the countless rooms where the travelers lodged. I went from one chattering group of men to another, but not one man I saw looked to me like the Reyes. In my mind, I carried a picture of Gindar, the chief. And though the realities I had so far encountered were like nothing I'd imagined, I was still wedded to the images inside of my own head. Once again, in the outer courtyard, I approached a camel driver, singing softly to himself as he slung a hudaj over a kneeling animal. His white teeth sparkled in the dark, shining face, in his dark, shining face, and he had a cheerful gleam in his bright black eyes. I mustered up the courage I needed to speak to him. Since the day I had become a woman, he and the man sitting at the gate were the first men, other than my father, to whom I'd spoken without wearing a hijab that covered my face. But I reminded myself, now I was not a woman. I was Nasir. Pardon me, uncle, I called out in a tone that I hoped was both good-natured and slightly condescending. He was only a camel driver, after all, and I was supposed to be a traveling merchant. Can you assist me with some directions? Certainly, my son, the driver responded. What do you want to know? Where can I find the leader of this caravan? I asked. Where can I find the fearful horseman Gendar, the chief? With a light touch on the camel's knees, the driver persuaded the animal to rise. Then he turned his full attention to me. What do you want him for, my son? He asked. I drew myself up to my full height. What business is that of yours, camel driver? I asked haughtily. He smiled. Now, don't get uppity, my son. It certainly is my business, for I'm that fearful horseman, Gendar, the chief. His eyes shone with laughter. I'm also a fearful camel driver, a fearful marksman, and even a fearful camp cook, if the need arises. Pardon me, honored chief, I murmured, ducking my head with sudden politeness, but I wasn't afraid. It was impossible to be afraid of such a cheerful man, even though his broad shoulders and 6 feet or more of height suggested that he wasn't the sort of person one would care to have for an enemy. My mistake was perhaps understandable. Gindar stood very close to me, his imposing figure making me feel positively scrawny. Do you wish to join my caravan? He asked. I nodded mutely. You've never traveled caravan before? He asked. It was a statement, not a question. That's true, I admitted. Then you must understand, he continued, that on my caravan, the ranks and classes that are so important in cities count for nothing. We're all equal, because the safety of all depends on the cooperation of all. If you travel with me, you treat everyone else in the group as if he were the Sultan in disguise, as indeed he might be. His eyes narrowed as he looked me up and down. A man on my caravan will tell you as much about himself as he wants you to know. Don't ask him any questions, and he won't ask you any. I nodded. That suited me just fine. What's the fee? I asked. You come too late, he replied briskly. He saw the shocked look on my face and smiled a little, as if he'd planned the whole exchange to achieve just that effect. I'm all filled up. Yusuf Ibn Bakr leads another caravan to the coast in a couple of days. Wait for him. What do you mean you're all filled up? I cried. How can that be? What difference does it make if another person comes along? Don't speak foolishly, my son, he said, the patronizing manner all on his side now. I can carry only so much food, and besides, if there are too many people, someone always manages to get lost. I'm only one, I begged. I couldn't wait. I couldn't go back home with my hair cut short and my women's clothes abandoned and my sisters believing a fib about my having gone to be a servant. I couldn't hang around Baghdad all by myself either. I'd used up too much money and run the risk of being recognized. The enormous sense of self-congratulation that had possessed me the day before as I'd come home from shopping in the souk was all gone now. Still, there was nothing for it but to go forward. I fell to my knees. Please, please, honored chief, take me with you. It's essential that I leave Baghdad today. I have some food of my own. Your cook and your baker won't have to prepare anything for me. I'm such a small, unimportant person. I'll take up no significant space. I'll sleep in the open. I'll travel the whole distance on foot. I'll be very good about keeping up. I beg you, Honored Chief, take me with you." "Get up, silly boy," he said, putting his hand on my upper arm and lifting me willy-nilly to my feet. "I told you, we're all equal here. No one has to grovel before Gindar the African. No one ever accused me of having a hard heart either. If it's so important to you, then you may come. It'll cost you 5 dinars." 5 dinars? I was flabbergasted. If I gave Gindar 5 dinars, I would be left with only 9. I couldn't even live in a town for more than a few months, let alone set up shop with just 9 dinars in my pouch. It was impossible. Why hadn't I asked my father to investigate these details more thoroughly? Why had I imagined that a caravan journey all the way to the sea would cost me only 2 dinars? What had I supposed that what I had why had I supposed that what I imagined was what was true? I was faint with the sudden realization of my own ignorance, my own naivete. Without a word, I turned away from Gindar and began to pick my way among the noisy, milling crowd back to the gate. I would go home. I would go home not 2 hours after I'd left, confess my failure, take off my jabba, put on my hijab, wait for my hair to grow back, and then, in penance, truly go for a servant in a rich man's house, where my maidenhood would be lost in a month's time, considered by my employer justified compensation for my lack of skill at housewifely tasks. So bleak was that prospect that another thought occurred to me. It would be better to attempt to cross the desert by myself and die on the journey, my bones picked clean by vultures and left to bleach in the sun, than go back home. Anything, anything would be better than the cowardice that a return to my father's house would represent. I hadn't even reached the Thalatha Bridge when I turned back again. I would try Gindar the African once more before I set out on my own. Inside the caravansary, a fat merchant was mounting the camel Gindar had saddled, assisted by a ragged boy. Gindar had disappeared, but he couldn't have gone far. "Please, gracious lad," I called, remembering Gindar's stricture about the Sultan in disguise, "could you tell me where Gindar the chief has gone? It's urgent that I see him." The boy lifted his hand to point toward the doorway leading inside, but before he could say anything, the fat man on the camel spoke.
"Tend to your business, boy," he ordered sharply. "You haven't any time for gossip."
Apparently the merchant had never heard Gendar's speech about the democracy of the caravan. But I had already glimpsed Gendar in the group of which the boy had pointed. It would be impossible to miss him, his tall, dark form towered so far above the others. I hurried toward him as quickly as I could in that milling throng. I didn't want to lose sight of him again. His back was to me when I reached him. "Honored Reyes," I said quite loudly when I was almost on top of him. It was difficult for me to speak up, but I had to in order to be heard above the din. He turned. "You again?" he asked with a little laugh when he saw me. "Did you come back to bargain with me? I'm not a bazaar merchant. My price is my price." "I wouldn't doubt that for a moment," I hastened to assure him. "But I must leave Baghdad. It's essential. I don't have 5 dinars to give you." I kept my tone and my carriage carefully polite, but proud and free. I wouldn't grovel. That wasn't a tactic to please a man like Gindar anyway. "Could I travel as a servant? If not yours, then for one of the merchants. I would do anything, anything at all. And I wouldn't ask for any pay other than my passage." "What other pay could you expect?" Gendar asked. "What are you able to do?" Not much that needed to be done on a caravan, but I trusted the quickness of my mind to teach me. I'd already learned a lot in a very short time. "Anything," I replied firmly, "anything at all." A thin, long-legged sun-browned man standing next to Gindar spoke up. Brother, he said, Jiha isn't satisfied with his boy, who cries day and night for his mother in his village. Jiha would be very, very happy to send the boy home and be rid of him if he had someone else to serve him. Me, I cried. Let it be me. You'll never regret it, kind sir, nor you, Chief Gindar, nor will Jiha, whoever he is. Gindar laughed. I see I can't escape. Allah has decreed that for good or ill, you're meant to make this journey with us. He put his hand on the other man's shoulder. Abu Sinan, take this lad to Jiha, and good luck to him. If I'd been listening as closely as I should have been, I would have been worried at the ironic tone in which Gindar spoke that final phrase. But I was so overjoyed at the success of my ploy that I had no room for anything in my mind but satisfaction. Come, lad, Abu Sinan said. Follow me. I smiled. Thank you, Chief Gindar. Abu Sinan was already on his way, and I hurried after him. Wait, Gindar called, wait. I stopped. So did Abu Sinan. You know my name, Gindar said. What's yours? My mouth opened. My tongue moved to my lips, but praise Allah, before I could form the words Baran, my mouth snapped shut again. When I reopened it, I was able to utter smoothly, Nasir, Chief. Nasir ibn Malik. My father's name was so common I thought it did no harm not to lie, about that at least. Well, child of Malik, Gindar said, make sure you serve Jiha well. I'm jeopardizing my reputation as a truth speaker for your sake. Don't worry, honored chief. I'll not fail you, I assured him. I'm eternally grateful to you for your help. Allah will reward you even if I can't. Gindar laughed. We'll see if your eternal gratitude lasts as long as it takes us to get to the coast. He turned away then to tend to the loading of a donkey, appearing to forget I'd ever existed. Come along, lad, Abu Sinan ordered. I followed him almost at a trot in an effort to keep up with his long strides as he crossed rapidly through the camp. In a moment, we were in the presence of Jiha. I had seen Jiha before. What had happened to my luck this morning? Jiha was the very same absurdly fat man whose unfortunate servant I had spoken to a little while earlier. He still sat astride his camel. Once he'd managed to settle his enormous bulk atop the poor creature, he was forced to remain there until he dismounted for the night. For him, getting on and off a camel was not an enterprise casually undertaken. His boy was holding the camel's reins. Jiha was screaming at the boy like a wild baboon. His face flushed red as blood, his waving arm cutting the air like a sword. You fool! Why do you force me on top of this creature when it's obvious that this caravan won't move for another half hour? It's lucky for you that you're down there and I'm up here, or I'd beat you within an inch of your life. The boy turned up his tear-streaked, dirty face. But Reyes, he moaned, you told me to help you mount. I dared not disobey you. The explanation didn't improve Jiha's temper. Whatever have I done to Allah, he shouted, that I should be cursed with such a stupid servant? Jiha, Abu Sinan called, the curse is lifted. I've brought you a new servant. At this I bowed low. Peace be with you, honored chief, I said. Straighten up, boy, so I can get a good look at you. I obeyed. The dirty-faced lad had stopped crying. He gazed at me with eyes full of such hope that he seemed to believe I was the prophet himself come to redeem the entire human race. You're awfully small, said Jiha. But very strong, honored chief, I assured him. I can't afford to pay you anything while we're on the caravan," he added. That was obviously a lie. He was garbed completely in silk. Even his traveling vest and jacket were of silk. "Once I've traded my goods in the cities along the coast, I'll make it up to you." He was lying again. Neither along the coast nor anywhere else would I or any other servant of his ever see so much as a dirham in cash. It didn't matter. If one poor boy ran off, he could always find another to sign on in expectation of the crumbs from his table and the chance to steal something. I knew his type. My uncle was cut from the same cloth. But it didn't matter to me. I had no intention of remaining with him once I reached the coast. Perhaps it should have mattered. Please go on to your reading journal and complete section 1 now before continuing on to the next section of reading. Hope you're enjoying the book.